Now, just a little warning before we begin, there will be spoilers in this video for the Andor series up through episode 11, so if you're not all caught up and you don't want anything ruined, it's a really good time to click away. Okay, so I think it's pretty safe to say that Luthen Rael has already become one of the most fascinating and intriguing characters in Star Wars, especially in more recent or Disney-era Star Wars, which has no surprise considering how little we've learned about just who he is or where he comes from in the series. Well, it's led to plenty of discussion or speculation regarding him, including some wondering if he could possibly be a Jedi or former Jedi. And though I don't think that's impossible, and I do understand why some like this idea or theory, which is absolutely fine if you do. I love a good theory or putting them out there and talking about them. Hell, I've put some pretty crazy ones out there myself in my time. But to be completely honest with you, I think making Luthen a Jedi would be one of the most unoriginal things possible out of a show that has been one of the most original things out of Star Wars in a long time. Because, for one, we already know how important the Jedi are going to be in saving the galaxy from the Empire and the Sith. We know that Yoda and Obi-Wan are in hiding, and that they have a plan for Luke, and it's going to pay off in the end, though maybe not exactly how they saw it paying off. We also know who the well-known heroes of the story are going to end up being. We know Luke is going to become a legend when all is said and done, and what some think that will do to him in the end. But the story that Andor is telling is one about the heroes just under the surface, the ones who made it possible for there to be a fight in the first place for Luke and the other well-known heroes to win. We're seeing those who maybe will never get the credit or recognition they truly deserve, which is something Luthen even talks about. We're seeing the risk and sacrifice that people without force powers and lightsabers to fall back on are making in the name of doing what's right, and how complicated what's right can sometimes be. Not to mention, one of the main ideas behind the series, one of the themes that they're going for here, is to ask the question, just how does the average person fight back against tyranny? What do people do in this galaxy when the Jedi are gone? Where does hope come from when the paragons of good and virtue have been toppled? And so the idea that Luthen, the one at the center of it all here, the one who starts to organize a rebellion and really put it in motion, you could say, that he's just another former Jedi feels very, shall we say, counterproductive to that theme. And as I said before, it's not very original either, especially when you consider how much thought has clearly been put into each and every character and their story, that we're seeing a level of depth and complexity out of this series that, to be blunt, we don't always get to see out of Star Wars. Which leads me to hope and believe that Luthen's story is something truly unique, not the story of another former Jedi. Either way, let's now take a bit of a closer look at this theory and see how much sense it does or doesn't make given all the potential evidence we have. And I think the best place to start is with the already rather famous speech or monologue at the end of the 10th episode, and how it's strong evidence against him ever being a Jedi. And I, of course, mean the one where he's talking about all the sacrifices he's made to fight the Empire, and how he has to essentially kill or let go of his own ego now, that he'll never get the satisfaction he wants from hopefully someday winning the fight that set him in motion or down this path in the first place. Which is something he very much would have long since learned or come to terms with as a Jedi, that for them, life is all about sacrifice and letting go of the ego, or this feeling or need to gain gratification for their heroic actions. In fact, this sounds far more like a man who once had, well, quite the ego and quite a bit in life to give up. He feels like someone who is usually very unwilling to give up and accept defeat under any circumstance, so much so that he'll destroy himself. He'll give up his very soul to win or defeat someone who has perhaps wronged him or taken something from him. Which doesn't sound very Jedi-like, and my guess for him is that somehow the Empire, or someone within it, maybe even the big guy himself, Palpatine, has wronged him or taken something from him, taken probably the most important thing from him, which was probably a person, because yes, he does show signs of caring. He clearly doesn't like or he regrets the terrible choices he has made, the lives that are being lost along the way. He does, yes, want to see victory for the greater good, but I think for him it's more that the greater good defeating the Empire just so happens to coincide with them having taken something from him and him wanting to defeat them because of that, not that his initial motivation was the greater good, and he's now willing to give up and sacrifice everything in the name of it, as a Jedi would. I think he is on a completely different path or course or origin story from, say, Mon Mothma, who starts out wanting to do something for the greater good, and slowly has to come to terms with the fact that you have to do some pretty shady things along the way. Though that said, it's also possible, I suppose, that he left the Jedi Order before, say, the Empire's rise to power. Maybe he left the Order when he was a youngling or a Padawan, because he was unwilling to make such sacrifices for the greater good, or to live like that back then, unwilling to give up his own ego and simply serve. And after he left, he made a nice little life for himself, one that he lost or had taken away from him when the Empire came to power. And now, kind of ironically, he is giving up everything for the greater good and doing it in a very non-Jedi-like way, which, yeah, could be a pretty interesting story, though I don't think it's going to be the way it pans out. Moving on, the next piece of evidence I see some presenting is how well he performed in the space battle in this previous episode, that he showed off some pretty incredible piloting skills. And well, first of all, I think that scene showed that he has one heck of a modded ship. He spared no expense on that thing. And second, that, yeah, he's a good pilot. Period. The same way, say, someone like Han Solo was a good pilot. And that there are no doubt plenty of really good pilots in the galaxy who don't use the Force to pull things off. And the fact that he was so calm and cool doesn't have to mean he's a Jedi, but instead could give us a clue as to who he was before this, that he was maybe in the military, maybe he fought in the Clone Wars, or maybe he's been doing something like this kind of shady stuff for a while. Basically, just because you're a really good pilot and you catch some Imperials by surprise with those skills, and you have a really good ship, it doesn't mean you're a Jedi. The other big piece of evidence some are pointing at is the walking stick he has in this previous episode that he gives up before his meeting with Saw. And I call it that because, despite some getting really excited by it in this episode, it's something we've seen before in previous episodes. We saw it in the first story arc when he goes to Ferrix, where again, it's quite clearly used as a walking stick, despite, yes, resembling a lightsaber. And I know some will say it's not just a walking stick, that maybe out one end comes the walking stick part, but at the other end, if you hit a different button, it'll activate the lightsaber. And that would be quite clever. If he gets stopped and searched by the Empire, by some stormtroopers, he can show them it's just his walking stick and they won't think the wiser, which is, yeah, not a bad idea or a bad way for an older guy to keep his lightsaber hidden. And so, yeah, I'll say it's not impossible that this is a lightsaber, and that even including something that, yes, does very much resemble a lightsaber, or could contain or hide one in some way, that it does feel too random to be random, you could say. We also saw him give a Kyber crystal to Cassian as a collateral, essentially, earlier in the series, which means maybe he does have a connection to the Jedi, or certainly as an antiquities dealer, he has knowledge and appreciation of their items. Who knows, it could even be that he is sort of inspired or motivated by the Jedi and their ways, and he just doesn't go about them the same way the Jedi did, for sure. Or that he had a friend who was a Jedi, and his friend was killed in Order 66, and so this downfall of the Jedi has sent him down this path. They could even be the ghosts he's referring to in his aforementioned speech. I don't think it's impossible there is some kind of connection between the Luthen, this antiquities dealer, and the Jedi, and the necklace, and how important the Kyber necklace was to him. It does very much imply a profound interest in the Jedi at the very least. But I still think him just being a Jedi is a pretty weak and overused story idea at this point. Not to mention he'd probably be known by the Empire, right? I have to imagine the Empire easily enough got their hands on a database of every single Jedi and has attempted to track them all down and discover the fate of each and every Jedi. Which would include Luthen, which would make it very odd that he was just sort of hiding in plain sight right on Coruscant and dealing in potentially Jedi and Sith artifacts as seen in his shop by things that at least look like oversized holocrons. He's dealing with the rich and powerful. He's dealing with senators. He's not hiding very well if he's a Jedi. And so, though, yes, I do think there are ways to get the Jedi thing or backstory for Luthen to work. I'm not completely ruling it out. Like, maybe he's a Jedi explorer who's been searching the galaxy for relics and he's not on the normal Jedi registry. And then when he returns home, he finds that the Empire has destroyed the Jedi and taken charge. But again, I go back to sort of the point of this series, showing or being about what the average people do or must do to fight the Empire, not what a former Jedi in any way, shape, or form is doing to fight the Empire. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think about all this. Is Luthen a former Jedi, or is he maybe Force sensitive, or does he have some type of connection to the Jedi Order? Or is there a whole different backstory for him that we'll hopefully get soon enough? Whatever the case may be, you know what to do. Leave your comments below, and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.